Mr. Ahmed here. Goal for today is to solve a quadratic by using the quadratic formula. So we've gone through quite a few ways in order to solve a quadratic. We have factored, we've used square roots, we've completed the square, and finally the most foolproof method to make sure that we can solve a quadratic is using the quadratic formula. A couple key things before we actually get to it. We need to get it in standard form in order to use the quadratic formula. Thus, it has to say equals 0. Ax squared plus bx plus c. So the a is in front of the x squared, the b is in front of the x, and the c is just the constant. So that is just a number. So our first couple examples, we're just going to put it into standard form and then identify a, b, and c. Because when we use the quadratic formula, we will have to state what a is, what b is, and what c is. So for the first example, number 1, it says x squared equals 7x, so we need to make it say equals 0. In order to do so, we have to bring the 7x to the other side by subtracting it. Then I would have x squared minus 7x equals 0. Cancels out on the right. Now in this case, the a is in front of the x squared. So the term in front of the x squared here, it's just x squared, so a is equal to 1, because it's 1x squared. B is in front of the x, so b is equal to negative 7. And the constant is just the number. This one doesn't have one, so c is equal to 0. Okay? Next one. Let's see here. We want it in standard form. Typically, when we put it in standard form, we would like the x squared to be positive, but it doesn't have to be. So we have two options here. We could subtract 4x squared from both sides, or we could move the 3x and the 2. All right? Either way would work. Choice is yours. I'm going to subtract 3x and subtract 2 from both sides, because it'll still say equals 0. So when I rewrite, I'd have 4x squared minus 3x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, now if you went the other way, that is definitely a choice you could do. You could have subtracted 4x squared from both sides. That's an option. Your values would just be different in regards to the signs. So in this one, a in front of the x squared, a is 4. B is negative 3, and c is just the constant, so that's negative 2. Okay, so we're going to have to identify a, b, and c in order to use the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula, in order for us to solve, we isolated x from standard form. We took standard form and solved for x. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus, so we have to do both the positive and the negative of the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There's actually a little song that goes with that, To Pop Goes the Weasel. It kind of sounds like this. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that might be a little jingle that can help you remember it. I'll probably sing that during class too. So here we go. First step, have to identify a, have to identify b, and have to identify c. So in this problem, a is 1, b is negative 6, and c is equal to 5. Okay, so that has to be done first. Now we take all these values and plug them into the formula. So the quadratic formula states x equals negative, use parentheses, b. That's a negative 6. So we have a negative times a negative 6. Next step says plus or minus the square root of b squared. Again, use parentheses. Negative 6 squared minus 4, parentheses where our a goes, that's 1, times c, which is 5. All divided by 2 times a, which is 1. Now, when you simplify this down, you have to follow the order of operations. So you got to be careful as you go. So when I do this, negative times a negative, that changes to a positive 6, plus or minus the square root. Now here, negative 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 1 times 5. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20, so it's minus 20 all over 2. One more step. 6 plus or minus 36 minus 20 is the square root of 16, all divided by 2. All right, now from here, just have to finish it off. 6 plus the square root of 16, square root of 16 is 4. So x is equal to 6 plus 4 divided by 2, and x is also equal to 6 minus 4 divided by 2. Just need to finish those off. 6 plus 4 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So one of our solutions is x equals 5. And the other one, 6 minus 4 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So our two solutions are x equals 5 and x equals 1. Next page. We're going to do 2 more. So, first step. This doesn't have the quadratic formula written down. All right? So if you need to rewrite it, feel free to do so. So, here we go. First step, put it into standard form. Minus 5 from both sides, minus 5, so I'd have 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 equals 0. So, identify A, B, and C. A is equal to 2. B is equal to 9. C is equal to negative 5. All right, now we plug it in. Quadratic formula goes x equals negative b. B is 9. Plus or minus square root b squared. Okay, so b squared. B is 9. Minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 5. All over 2a. 2 times 2. Now we have to simplify it down. In this case, we end up with a negative 9 plus or minus square root 9 squared is 81 minus 4 times 2 times negative 5. 4 times 2 times negative 5. So we got to be careful here with this minus sign. I already put my minus in. 4 times 2 is 8. And then 8 times 5 is 40, but it's a negative 40. So it's minus negative 40 all over 2 times 2, that is 4. All right. Minus a negative changes to a plus. 81 plus 40 is 121. So we have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 121 divided by 4. Equals x, equals x. Now from here I'm going to rewrite my two cases. X is equal to negative 9 plus the square root of 121, that's 11, over 4, and x is equal to negative 9 minus 11 divided by 4. Okay, then we just got to finish that up. Negative 9 plus 11 is 2. 2 over 4 is 1/2. And then over here, negative 9 minus 11, well, that's negative 20. And negative 20 over 4 is 5. So x is equal to 5. So our two solutions, 1/2 and 5. Okay? For the U-try, I would recommend trying this one out, then looking at the video again to see if you get stuck. Put it on pause, but here we go. First step, identify A. That's 2. B is negative 5. C is 3. Plugging it in. Negative b. Careful with the parentheses. Negative times a negative 5. Plus or minus square root. B squared. Negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c. That's 3. All over 2 times a, 2 times 2. All right, simplify it down. Negative times a negative changes to a positive 5. Plus or minus the square root. Negative 5 squared is 25. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. So minus 24 all over 4. All righty. 25 minus 24, that's just 1. So this is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 1. That's going to be 1 over 4. So write out my two cases. X equals 5 plus 1 divided by 4, and x is equal to 5 minus 1 divided by 4. Simplify these down, we'll leave it as a fraction. 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 over 4 is 3 over 2. And lastly, 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. We have completed the quadratic formula. Have a good rest of the day.